There's a correlation between the flavors in the food you eat and the images you see when watching movies and television, particularly how they're color graded. I would like to demonstrate that correlation by showing you how I make braised chicken tacos, but know that this idea can be applied to practically any dish you can make. Hopefully, this idea will give you an idea of how to quote-unquote visualize flavor. Let's start with the recipe. Before anything else, you gotta salt your chicken. I have about 1.5 pounds of thighs here, and I'm not going to trim off any of the fat, because that's gonna help flavor our sauce later. I'll let mine sit in salt for about a half hour, but you could certainly go longer. This step is totally non-negotiable, because the water expelled from the chicken is gonna help us get a better sear. Refrigerate this uncovered until we're ready for it. Normally I prep the vegetables while the chicken is cooking, but I'm gonna do it here in advance. I just need to dice 1 red bell pepper, 1 green bell pepper, and 1 sweet onion. You don't have to be too precise here, but go for small pieces, because we're looking for the veggies to melt into the sauce. While the cutting board's dirty, I'm also going to cut some garnishes, some cilantro and jalapeno. I don't know why people have jalapenos and scrape the guts out when they can be cut exactly like bell peppers. It's so much easier, and now there's not spicy oils all over my hands. I'll just discard that. For spices, today I'm using cumin, chipotle chili powder, garlic powder, paprika, dried oregano, and then I ruined the pretty spread with some cayenne. The quantities are in the description, and please feel free to mess around with this. I typically just make this up every time. Alright, we're all plossed out, so let's start cooking. Over medium-high heat, get some oil heating in your pan of choice. I'm using stainless steel today. While that heats up, dry the surface of your chicken thighs. This is going to make a much better sear, which is the first step in creating great flavor here. Admittedly, I didn't get the best color on this chicken, but I was juggling 2 cameras and trying to remain conscious of sanitation. But no excuses, we're trudging right along. If you're in a stainless steel pan like this, you can kind of furiously shake it when you first put the chicken into the pan to keep it from sticking. But if it sticks a little, it's far from the end of the world. Alright, there's decent color on that first side there, so let's give them a flip. Don't worry about cooking these all the way through, we're just looking to get a nice browning on the outside. Second side's looking pretty good, and hey, there's a decent little fond at the bottom of the pan there. I'm gonna hold this chicken in a bowl to the side. You'll see why I use a bowl later. Any little bits of meat stuck to the pan like that are totally fine. They're gonna integrate with the vegetables. And speaking of, let's quickly get those into the pan. I'm gonna add about half my jalapeno in there as well. Add a little salt, and soon enough water will start coming out of the vegetables, and it'll deglaze the pan. Scrape the bottom with a wooden spoon so that fond doesn't burn. Stir this around occasionally, and after a few minutes, a second fond is going to develop, and once that nears burning, we're gonna add our spices to toast and kind of awake them for about a minute. Okay, that's getting pretty close to burning, so let's dump in a whole carton of stock. I'm using chicken stock, but only because the store was out of veggie. I typically prefer veggie. Scrape the pan to ensure nothing burns and reintroduce the chicken. See, I like to keep it in a bowl so that all of the juices down there at the bottom are easy to pour back into the pan. Don't waste that stuff, it tastes really good. Once this comes up to a boil, toss a lid on and reduce the heat to low. While that simmers for 15 or 20 minutes, let's talk about the thesis of this video. Here's some footage of a dweeb eating the tacos you've been watching me make. It looks pretty bland, right? That's because footage straight out of this camera is just like most food right out of its packaging. It's not seasoned. There's low contrast, low saturation. Generally, there's not a lot of character. Salt in your food is just like contrast in an image. Bump up the contrast, and we're starting to get closer to a well-seasoned image. But if you overdo the salt, yeah, I think we've all tasted something that looks this salty and it's not good. Let's apply this similar idea to color. Here's footage of our tacos and a chip chart, which is a tool camera nerds use to ensure color accuracy. Colors are kind of like the spices we choose to put into our dish. So let's say these colors are these spices, right? And how we choose to express these colors is through the kind of acidity we choose to add to the dish, or how we color grade the image. You could add vinegar, rice vinegar, white wine, balsamic, citrus juices. There are so many different ways to play with color in your food, so many different ways to express color in your food. And what's so cool about this is there aren't necessarily wrong answers here. The idea is kind of like slapping an Instagram filter on your food. You can pour white wine into the photo of you vacationing in Mexico, or you can squeeze lime juice on it. One of those things is more culturally appropriate than the other, but you're vacationing during a pandemic. What do you care? All right, let's go back to the kitchen. I tested this for salinity and acidity, and I decided that from the salt from the chicken and the salt that we put in the vegetables, my salinity, my contrast was where I wanted it to be. But I needed more acidity, so I squeezed a whole lime into the braise, and I feel like that was getting me to where I wanted to be. We need to reduce this down to a sauce that coats the chicken, so we need to evaporate the water off. Crank the heat. This is going to take however long it takes, just be patient. When it gets to about here, you'll want to start shredding your meat. I use the back of 2 forks to do this. Keep in mind that you're creating more surface area for the sauce to be absorbed by doing this, and it's also going to thicken as it cools, so don't over-reduce. I'll give you some options on how you can plate these little baby tacos. Personally, I'm a bit of a purist, and I just like diced white onion and a little bit of minced jalapeno. In any configuration, you can always add avocado. If you're one of those foodie people that always has pickled onions on hand, you can totally put them to use here. And if you have a picky eater or a child who is, by consequence, a picky eater, you can just top it with some cheddar cheese. Lime wedges are basically a requirement, and so long as you don't have that soap gene, so is cilantro. Oh yeah, and drizzle some sour cream on there too if you want, huh? If you want one last little metaphor, I would say that garnishes are kind of like different vignettes you can put on an image. It could look like this, or something like that. Don't do that. Whenever possible, tacos should be enjoyed with friends. This recipe should yield about 12 of them, and take it from me, you don't want to eat all of them in one sitting. But for now, it seems I have no other choice.